Welcome back to Inside Biotech. I'm your co-host, Karishma Chhugani. For those who may be new, Inside Biotech is brought to you by BCLA, a nonprofit organization dedicated to inspiring, educating, and connecting emerging scientists and entrepreneurs to help grow and diversify the biotech ecosystem in Los Angeles. On this podcast, we invite you inside one of the fastest growing sectors in Southern California. Here, we bridge science with storytelling to bring you the most novel, up-to-date, and thrilling news on the biotech world in SoCal. If you want to stay informed about current progress and developments in the biotech industry, you're in the right place. Twice a month, my co-host Riley Conover-Elmer and I sit down with scientists, founders, investors, and industry leaders to explore the cutting-edge work happening inside their companies and to share diverse perspectives from across niches and career stages in biotech. In today's episode, I'm joined by Rene Hubert, who received his PhD in molecular biology from the University of Southern California and completed his fellowship in genomics at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. He is currently the scientific director of early career talent and academic engagement at Amgen, where he leads initiatives to support and develop emerging scientific talent and strengthen partnerships with academic institutions. We talk about the personal and professional challenges he faced growing up, his 5-point plan for building a successful career in biotech, his personal mantra, and key moments that shaped his journey to where he is today. Thank you so much for being here today, Rene. We're so happy to have you on Inside Biotech.
Hey, Karishma, so glad to be here. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. And I hope, hopefully through this conversation, we could help early career talent break into biotech.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start at the beginning. So before the scientist, before the biotech career, who were you?
Yeah, that's a big question, right? Where my origin story is what you're asking for. I think the best way to describe my origin is maybe with the challenges that I had early in my life, actually. So I think some of your listeners were probably first generation university students, I'm imagining. And that's my situation. I was a first generation PhD in my whole family lineage going back to caveman times, right? The only one in my family to have a postdoc. So I had to break new ground. So that was, as I had to face those challenges, but I really, even early while I was in grade school, I realized at an early age that the value of mentorship, because I had a bit of a challenging family life and I had to go outside my family unit to really get some understanding from others, some support from others, and teachers were really important, and classmates, other family members. But it's a weird thing that, in grade school to understand that mentors are important, but I figured that out. I also had to figure out, because I also had a language problem, which is a funny thing, you might not realize that, but English is my second language. My first language was French from Quebec. I was born in Quebec in Canada. But we moved to an English part of Ontario when I was young, and I had to go to a French grade school until I went to high school is when it turned to English. And that transition was really challenging for me. The educational system in the French school wasn't very good, and so I struggled a lot when I got into high school. My grades took a dive. I went from being valedictorian in grade school to just my grades tanking, and that was a huge lesson for me there too. That was a big challenge, and it taught me the value of hard work. My work ethic, my study ethic in high school was unbelievable. If I wasn't in school, I was studying or working my part-time job, but had to work really hard to bring my grades up. Very early I learned the value of mentorship and hard work, and in high school I also learned the importance of identifying what my passions were, what actions I wanted to make with those passions, and what my mantra is, the why. Why am I in science? I had to figure that out in high school really early because I really felt I was on my own. I had to figure this out. In fact, my dad didn't want me to go to university, of all things, right? You think. So he wanted me to work construction. He's a drywall taper, like my two older brothers did, and he didn't see the value of a higher education. I think had a grade 6 education. That was his reality. So he wanted me to start paying rent at home when I finished high school. So I actually left. I left home to be on my own. So I really was pretty independent. But because I knew my dream in high school, what I wanted to do, my goal was to find a cure for cancer. I figured that out in high school. And I realized that if I worked construction, I wouldn't be able to find a cure for cancer, right? That'd be an unusual thing. So I just went off on my own. I didn't let my dad stand in the way of me and my goals and my dreams. And I went off on my own, and I was really independent and learned resiliency and hard work. But really understanding what I wanted to do in life was important. And that's why I really encourage that in your listeners, that they really dig in deep and be really clear on what drives them and why they're in science. Because if you have challenges like I did, where your dad doesn't want you to go to school at the university, you'll still hang on to it. And I know some of your listeners are probably in the same situation where your family unit doesn't really support higher education, and they want you to contribute to the family income, and they don't want you to leave home. They want to hang on to you tight. And that's a tough thing to do, to stand up to your family and say, okay, I hear you, but my dreams matter most, and I'm going to keep following my dreams. Anyways, it's a long-winded origin story. Sorry, I went on there.
Thanks for sharing. I appreciate it. And it's a true testament to where you are today. And I think that's the beauty about learning more about, our guests that we interview. There's a journey that got you to your destination today.
Yeah, you never know. Like when you meet people, everyone has their own origin story, and usually it's filled with challenges. There are very few people that had a perfect life and everything was rosy and they had everything smoothly all throughout their lives, right? Most people are kind of like me, right? So that's part of learning empathy and really be empathetic with people, even if people are acting a little strange or a little hostile, a little difficult. You know, they got here somehow, and they had their own challenges that they had to overcome, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So, how did you kind of channel into that resilience and eventually decide that PhD was for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, as part of my passion plus action equals mantra equation, my passion was biology and chemistry in high school, and I was really excited about that. And my action was to change the world. I wanted to make it a better place. So, finding a cure for cancer is my mantra. So, I did a biochemistry degree, honors co-op at University of Waterloo in Canada, which was terrific because it had 6 internships, 6 co-ops by the time I graduated. And so it was good for me because I wasn't financially supported by my parents, so my work terms helped me gain enough income so I could pay my next 4 months in school, right? Because I went to school 4 months, I worked 4 months, went to school 4 months, worked 4 months, all the way through. So I was in co-op, and I even when I was in school, I had jobs on the side too, all the way through my PhD, even during my postdoc. I always had to have multiple jobs. I struggled financially. I had food insecurity issues at times. But during my work terms, I worked at the RCMP in Canada. It's like the FBI of Canada in the forensic labs. And that's when DNA typing came out, identifying individuals by their DNA types. I just blew up. I fell in love with DNA, and I have DNA on my shirt here, as you can tell. I'm a real DNA geek. So I fell in love with DNA at that time. Actually, my license plate used to say DNA LUVR,
I love
DNA
that.
lover.
Very on brand.
That's right. And got really excited about DNA. That's why I decided to do a PhD in molecular biology, to study the molecules of life, DNA and protein DNA interaction. So I decided to do that. Instead of taking a job with the RCMP, I wanted to challenge myself a little bit more. I thought, okay, I'll take the PhD challenge, and then I'll come back and do forensic work maybe. But it still wasn't lining up with my dream of finding a cure for cancer. So I just felt I needed to challenge myself. And to make my challenge even more difficult, I left Canada. I left my home country to do it. So I came to USC to do my PhD in molecular biology. And I really was outside my comfort zone. It was a really challenging time as well. But luckily, I had built up this resiliency in high school and in my undergrad, really independent and self-sufficient. And I just busted through obstacles and hanging on to my dreams and, running through it. So that's how I got to fall in love with DNA. And I did a lot of genomics work. I was around the Human Genome Project time, and I was peripherally involved with that during my PhD. And then in my postdoc, I became a gene hunter for Down syndrome, actually at Cedars-Sinai, looking for the genes that cause atrioventricular septal defects in Down syndrome patients. But then I leveraged that skill of gene hunting to help with a startup company that spun out of UCLA called Agensis. And it was basically at the time it was a prostate cancer company looking for genes in prostate cancer. So there you go. My mantra of finding a cure for cancer finally manifested itself in my first job at Agencis in Santa Monica, looking for genes in cancer. And I have over 100 patents on genes.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I've
Congratulations.
yeah, and I helped discover some genes that are very impactful in the area of cancer. So I'm proud of that impact that I did there. But from that moment on of being in a startup after my postdoc, over 25 years has been in the Los Angeles area, working in various biotech, mid-size, small, and then eventually I wound up at Amgen. But I've been impacting patients the whole time, which I'm very blessed and really lucky that my high school dream of impacting patients has come true throughout my whole career. So I've been really lucky.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing. That's really amazing, and you should be so proud of yourself that, you went through so many challenges. And yeah, give yourself a pat on the back. You went through so many challenges prior to pursuing the PhD, and then going into a PhD has its own challenges. So, what were some of the lessons that you had learned prior to your PhD that really helped you get through it? And what are some separate challenges in the PhD that you faced?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, the work ethic was that I developed in high school to get my grades up high enough to be able to go to university really helped me out. Like I was just a study machine. I was studying on weekends, at nights, and I had a regimented study schedule, and that was really important. And then in my undergrad, just learning life. Like I was on my own. I was moving every 4 months with my jobs and going back to school. So learning how to budget for your rent and your food and all that kind of stuff. So that really helped out a lot. And, I had some challenges in my PhD as well. I had some financial challenges, and luckily my PhD mentor listened to my financial challenges, and he gave me an extra job in the lab doing the ordering for the lab, and he paid me extra because I was doing the ordering. And instead of working at Carl's Jr., that was a good thing to have. So he helped me out there. But I failed my qualifying exams the first time. So as much of a study hound I was, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I have average intelligence, but the qualifying exams are really tough. You spend about 6 months studying for them. At USC, they were basically open. They can ask you any question under the sun. So you have to basically study textbooks and try to and I failed it the first time, and that really, hit me hard, and it was just shocking. And I hung on to my dream, but look, I got to find a cure for cancer. I got to stick with this. I'm not backing down. I'm resilient. I'm tough, and I can do it. And and that 3 months later, I wrote them again, and I passed. Luckily, if I fail the second time, you're out of the program, right? So there was a lot of pressure, but I just stuck with it again, like throughout my life. It's just hang on to my dream. Don't let anything get in the way. And work hard. Just work really, really hard and be focused. And so that helped me get through the challenges of my PhD.
Yeah. And what were some of your favorite moments during your PhD? Because of course, we talked about the challenges, but there's always these moments, could be epiphany moments, or just this
Yeah.
moment where you kind of sit down and realize like, wow, I'm doing this right now.
Yeah, actually, I don't have it here, but I actually have a picture in my office at work. I have a picture of me holding an ethidium bromide stained gel of PCR products on a gel. And I'm so excited and I'm just beaming. And it was the moment where, for the first time on the planet, someone was able to amplify DNA from a single cell, it was a sperm cells that we were working with, from 3 polymorphic trinucleotide repeat loci. And that was such an exciting moment. And my colleague, a fellow PhD student, he was taking a photography course that summer, and he heard me yelling in the dark room, "Yay!" I was all excited. And he opened the door and he took a picture of me holding the gel, and he captured that moment. I've got that sitting in my office for inspiration because it reminds me of the joy that I have in science, the joy of discovery and being the first to do something and to succeed. And that was such a cool moment. And, I got a Nature Genetics paper out of it. It was just a really, really cool moment because in science, most of our moments are filled with failures and having to repeat, essays don't work. It's a little frustrating. When you have these kind of moments, I was lucky to get that captured on film, but it reminds me to savor those moments when they happen, because celebrate, savor, pat yourself on the back, because it gets you through the tough times when you don't have those moments, right? So that's one of the moments during my PhD that really sticks with me, that I'm proud of. And again, it's that joy, just the thrill and the joy of discovery. That's what drives a lot of people doing science.
Yeah. That's awesome. So walk us through the transition. You finished the PhD. What's next, and what's going through your head? You just made this discovery. Is that something you want to continue within the same field of work, or you want to pivot to something else?
Yeah. So a lot of people listening in are maybe at a stage, do I do a postdoc or do I go into industry question, right? That's the age old question. But when I was coming up, years and years ago, a postdoc was more of a natural progression, right? Most people did postdocs. So I didn't have to think about it too much. But for me, it was actually very important. I needed a postdoc for a few different reasons. First of all, during my PhD, my skill set was very narrow. I did a lot of PCR. So I was a real PCR expert, at a time when PCR was just coming up. It had just been discovered. And so that was cool, but I was a one-trick pony, and I realized it. And I realized to be successful in a career, I had to diversify my skill sets. So that's why I found that a postdoc was really important to me. And, so I can diversify my skill sets. Also become more independent and more of a leader as well, for me, was really important. So if some people on the call during their PhD, they've learned a plethora of techniques and processes, and they're experts in a lot of different fields, and they feel like they've showed leadership abilities. Maybe they don't need a postdoc, right? Maybe they can get a job right away. But I never regretted doing a postdoc, and it was really beneficial for me. I wouldn't have been able to get the first job that I got, which was during my postdoc. I was networking with a fellow postdoc at UCLA. I was at Cedars-Sinai at the time, but taking classes at UCLA. She told me, "Hey, Dr. Sawyer's is starting up a company in Santa Monica to focus on prostate cancer." So I contacted him, and I got an interview even before the company was even starting, and got in that way. So it's a personal decision. What I would encourage your listeners to do, though, is if you're thinking of industry as well, there are terrific postdocs in industry. Amgen has 35 postdocs right now throughout the world doing their postdocs at Amgen. And that gives you 3 to 4 years of time in industry, focus on an exciting project with all the resources of the biggest biotech company in the world, right? Like how crazy is that? You don't have to worry about reagents or equipment or, advice from experts. Over 31,000 people at Amgen. You'll find somebody that can help you out. And I've been fortunate enough to mentor 2 postdocs in my experience at Amgen, and that was really satisfying as a mentor. So I've seen the program pretty in depth, and I'm on a steering committee that helps manage the postdocs, and I really support that program. So that's another way that you can do a postdoc. It's no longer just done in academia like during my time.
So after you're done with your postdoc, and I guess before you stepped into Amgen, you worked for a few different companies. And so what drove some of your decisions to work in those companies? Was it your choice? Was it not your choice? Was it based on the job economy?
Good question. Yeah. So, starting up at Gensis was really exciting. If anybody has opportunities to be in a startup, jump on it, especially when you're young and you don't have a mortgage and you don't have a family or whatever. Just jump on it. It's a really exciting time. So I was lucky enough to do that. And like I said, I was a gene hunter for prostate cancer genes and other cancer genes as well during that time. And my team discovered many, many, many genes. So it was really satisfying. That it created the framework for the expansion of the company and the success the company had. It eventually got bought out by Astellas, and it was really successful, and it created Padcev, which is a bladder cancer antibody drug conjugate, right? So I did help contribute to finding a cure for cancer, for bladder cancer through that experience. I worked there 4 years, and then after a while, I was kind of like, I want to change my skill sets from being a gene hunter to get more on the production of antibody side of things, and the production of recombinant proteins. And I switched over to Xencor, which is a terrific company that's in Pasadena. I used to be in Monrovia, and I worked there to help work on expression systems for mammalian recombinant production. And I learned those skills, and I really fell in love with that field. Did a little bit of process development work, during that time. But like life in biotech, I got laid off from Xencor. So the move to Xencor was voluntary. I networked and got a connection to there, but then I got laid off from Xencor, and I had to make some career choices. I took a job at Osmotech. It wasn't the best fit for me. It wasn't along my line of finding a cure for cancer. And so I eventually left there. And I did a really cool thing that not too many people have done in my field is I took a sabbatical. Um, which, I understand why professors do sabbaticals. It was really needed for me. I was kind of burned out a little bit at the time. Not, I was struggling a little bit. I was in a job that wasn't aligned with my goals of finding a cure for cancer. And my stocks from Agencis paid off because of the Astellas deal. So I had a bunch of cash in the bank. I was in a job I wasn't really fulfilled with. So I took a year off to do some really crazy stuff, not science related at all, very artistic, like I was a roadie in a rock band, actually a yoga rock band. Sounds kind of crazy.
No
I
way.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, I was the sound guy. I did the soundboard. I learned all of that, and I toured with the band. My wife and I. My wife managed the band, and we had about 90 gigs a year. We traveled all over the place, yoga festivals, New Thought churches. We even went into prisons and jails to do musical programs. We had a nonprofit that did that. We had retreats in Bali. I've been to Bali about 7 or 8 times on retreats and other activities. So I was doing all this artistic stuff. I even had a travel show that I pitched to the Travel Channel. With a partner, we wrote a bunch of episodes for a series called Snack World, which is about a PhD scientist traveling the world, exploring the world of snacks and meeting with families and looking at the cultural impacts of snacks, seeing how they're manufactured, the health impacts, kind of like the Bill Nye the Science Guy meets Anthony Bourdain of science. I got a little bit of traction. It was a lot of fun, but obviously it didn't get picked up. Otherwise, you'd have seen me on TV. But anyways, the cool thing about all this is I stepped away from science and was very artistic and creative, and it rejuvenated me. So when I went back to science, I was just firing on all cylinders, and I just loved it. And so I went back. Actually, I worked at Agencis twice. So it's a lesson for not burning any bridges. So in total, I worked at Genesis for 9.5 years, 4 years the first time, 5.5 the second time. And I worked back at Xencor twice. So I boomeranged at both those companies for a little while, right? So don't burn out any bridges. It's a small world in the biotech industry. I was able to be lucky enough to do this in the greater Los Angeles area because I love LA and, what LA has to offer. And I just rode that wave.
Yeah. Well, this is why I love hosting this podcast because how would I have known that about you if I didn't, interview you when we got into this? So that's super cool. Did you ever feel like there was a point where you were kind of just fed up with biotech and you wanted to kind of walk away from everything completely and pivot careers?
Well, yeah, like I said, before the sabbatical, right? I got a little burnt out, I think. And it's a lesson for your listeners to really keep tuned in to what's going on at a job, right? Like how it makes you feel. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. It was a little outside my wheelhouse. I wasn't doing a great job, frankly. I tried to push through it. I was creating stress in my life at high levels. And eventually the universe tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" It's like, you're unhappy. You got money in the bank. You don't have kids. You can travel. You can do all this crazy stuff. Just jump. And that was one of the best decisions I made in my career, really, is to disconnect from that unhealthy environment and just recharge, reset. So a lot of us will get into those situations, right? You might have your mantra, your why in life. You want to find a cure for cancer, Alzheimer's, or whatever it is. But sometimes you might be doing a job for a few years that doesn't align with that because you have to pay the rent and put food on the table, right? But eventually, hopefully, keep repeating your mantra, and you'll manifest the direction that it takes to fulfill your goals and your dreams.
We have, wide range of listeners. We have students, we have industry professionals, and a lot of students that are listening might feel like they're behind or they're kind of feeling more unsure about themselves. So, for someone that's in that place right now, what would you want them to take away from your story?
Yeah, yeah. Insecurity is my middle name. I was so insecure throughout, most of my life, and even now at some level, although I've managed it a little bit better, right? We all have the imposter syndrome thing that goes on. And I realized looking back, like, for instance, when I was at Agencis as a startup, I was so insecure about what we were doing. We thought that Amgen and Merck and Abbott were going to beat us out, right? But we did some amazing things. We were like a bunch of postdocs starting this company. We, looking back, as insecure as we were, we accomplished really great things that are impacting patients today, right? So I would encourage people to hopefully not waste as much time in that anxiety and that because you're actually pretty amazing. And you may not notice that because you're just young and you're just starting out, but you guys can do some amazing things right out of college, so it's easier said than done. I acknowledge that, but looking back, I wish I hadn't wasted so much time and stress around that kind of anxiety. And again, if you identified your passion, your action, and your mantra, it'll help get you through those tough times. And that I always fell back on that, right? I want to find a cure for cancer. I got to get through this. This is my dream. It's not going to be easy, but get through it. And surround yourself with, again, I mentioned mentors at the beginning, right? In those situations, mentors and sponsors and advocates, they're so important to you, right? You need a little team. Everyone needs an entourage to get through life. You can't do it. You can't do it alone. Leaning on it's family, it's teachers, it's colleagues, it's find people that'll support you and encourage you, hear you, and empathize with you. It's one of the best prescriptions for getting through those tough times.
Yes, I agree. I think it takes a village. There's nothing you can do alone. So it's very important to surround yourself with people that are supportive and, like you said, that hear you, and yeah, are there for you.
Hello, I'm Dylan Kassane, host of Beyond Biotech, the weekly podcast from La Biotech. Each Friday, we explore the latest in biotechnology, sharing insights on breakthroughs, research, and the innovations shaping the future of medicine. From advancements in gene therapies to AI-driven drug development and cutting-edge cell therapy, from top pharma and venture capital perspectives to fresh thought leadership from rising stars, we deliver deep conversations weekly with experts, entrepreneurs, and changemakers. Discover how biotech is changing the world, one innovation at a time. Subscribe to Beyond Biotech on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite platform.
So let's pivot and go back to your time at Amgen and where you started at Amgen and where you are now and how you were able to experience different roles.
It's a great path to talk about here. One of the big benefits of being at a company like Amgen, which is huge, is you could move around the company as you go along. Potentially, you have options to change departments and explore various things. We have rotation programs where you can spend a year working in other departments. And that's why people spend 25, 30 years working at Amgen, because they had maybe 5 jobs during that time and they've moved around. They've always kept, excited about things, right? So, again, not just Amgen, but other big companies. That's one of the things to think about as you go along. One of the lessons that I learned that I think is really important is along the way, try to identify what your superpowers are. What is your special talent, right? Everyone are really, really great at something. Not what you're just good at and you can get by and get it done. Like, what are you outstanding in, right? Try to figure that out. And it's harder than you might think, because if you think it's easy, you think it's easy for everybody else, so you don't give it that much attention. But for me, my supervisor tapped me on the shoulder one day and said, "Look, you are amazing at networking and connecting with people. Like you have a really great talent at that. Scientists aren't usually good at that sort of thing, right? But you stand out in that area. And I was kind of like, really? Okay. I enjoyed doing that, but I didn't think I was that great at it. And that became important to me because I used to lead a team of lab scientists, in a protein engineering group and loved doing that. But I was always mentoring. I had a couple of postdocs. I helped start fellowship programs, PhD fellowship programs. And I was always passionate about engaging with academia and networking in that area and so on. So an opportunity came up for me to do that full time. And that was like the dream jobs, because that's what I thought I was really, 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 really good at. And I had the full support of my supervisor and her supervisor and her supervisor. I was able to transition to the job I have now, right? Which is director of early career talent and academic engagement. And I'm having such a ball doing it. I'm having a great time impacting talent, creating talent pipelines to Amgen as well as innovation pipelines to Amgen through academia. And it's been really great. But what helped me get there was the acknowledgement of my superpower of networking and being good at mentoring and that sort of thing. And if I hadn't had the help of my supervisor, I may not have been able to identify that, right? So, as they say, luck is preparedness meets opportunity. So I was basically prepared because I knew what my superpower was. And then just a few months later, an opportunity came up. And so I got lucky and I got the best job in the world. Yeah, pretty awesome.
Tell us more about the best job in the world.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like I'm just with a small team and partners. I've been able to help develop PhD fellowship programs at Amgen where the PhD students spend 6 months training on site at Amgen, which is really a really cool thing to set up. They learn during their PhD what life is in a biotech company. It's kind of like a long internship, but you get some really special mentoring, and so on. I also helped set up a post-baccalaureate program for the first time at Amgen last year. Right, so these are undergraduates that just graduated and they want to go to get a PhD or an MD, but they think, I need a little bit more training. I need to learn more techniques. I'd like to experience life in biotech, maybe get authorship on a paper. And maybe then my application to a PhD program is going to look really good, right? If you can think about it, hey, spend 2 years working at Amgen after your undergrad, getting all this great training and the faculty members would suck you up right away, right? Because you're already trained with a lot of important techniques and you can hit your PhD running.
Great opportunity
Yeah.
that I would have only taken because I did a master's before my PhD. So in between for the same reason, but I think it would have been very cool to get that experience in biotech.
Yeah, and to be immersed in it, because if you still want to get your PhD after you've been in it for a year and a half or so, you're really wanted, and the faculty members that are interviewing you for PhD programs are going to realize that this person really wants it. They've experienced life in the industry for a while. They understand what it's like, and they know the importance of getting a PhD to make maximum impact. That's a cool program. I'm also involved with the postdoc program. I do a lot of outreach. I'll go visit a lot of universities and go on career panels. I visit a lot of clubs, like the chemical engineering club at UC Santa Barbara. I've been there a few times. There are industry days that I participate in. I also help create fellowships between local universities in the LA area as well, and get involved with sponsored research also. And I just love interacting with professors and faculty and students. And then ultimately it's giving back for me because I had tremendous mentors growing up. Like I mentioned earlier, that if I hadn't those mentors, I'd been on a very different path. And so I find it's important to give back. It's important to train the next generation of scientists because when they find a cure for pancreatic cancer, I'll take credit for it, right? Because that's part of accomplishing my goal of finding a cure for cancer. If a trainee of mine finds a cure for cancer, I'm right there. I'm going to be taking credit.
I'd say another thing that I have noticed actually about you, I've been following you for a bit of time because I was vice president of BCLA for a year. And before that, I was in media and marketing. And I think you have always been very good about marketing yourself and not marketing yourself, but more so just also being very active on LinkedIn and continuing the networking. I see it. I've been seeing it for the last few years. And so, yeah, I think that's a great skill that a lot of people listening can also take away. Because I think often people do things, but you don't always post about it. It's not to, not to show off to post about it, but it's kind of like, hey, like this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm passionate about. And that's how you make more connections as well.
Yeah, I do that for a number of reasons. One of them has to do with, I probably advise 70 or 80 students a year. I have these one-on-one sessions on a Friday afternoon. Almost every Fridays, I'm chatting with students and helping them out. And when I go to events, I run into them. I just like that. And also, I hear their success stories. I have one that I mentored who was extremely bright and he couldn't get into a PhD program at Stanford, and I didn't really understand why. He was really tremendous, and then he eventually got in at the master's level for that program, and then he finally got transferred into the PhD program after, and I've been mentoring him for about 4 years. So it was really great to see his journey and commiserate with him in his struggles, and also to help celebrate in the successes. So those are the moments, like my PCR moment I talked about before, with these moments of seeing people that I've advised be successful is complete payback, and it's so satisfying, and it just keeps me going and going.
Yeah, I think that's super awesome. When you think about the impact that you want to leave behind, what matters most to you?
Finding a cure for cancer, or the next generation that I train finding a cure for cancer, I think. Yeah, so really, I think it comes down, my biggest legacy would be that I've helped people get on the career path that it's really satisfying for them, and that they're making an impact on patients themselves, and it's multiplied, right? You'd be surprised how a short conversation could really change someone's life. I like to believe, maybe it's my ego, that I've done that a few times, that having someone that they could listen to, they can be listened to and understood for a moment, and give a little tiny piece of advice that I take for granted, but for them, and to hear it for the first time, changes their lives, right? And I've seen that a few times. I think that those are the things I like to be remembered for. Also, be remembered for, again, some of the genes that I help identify that may have led to therapeutics. That's a great legacy to have. The other thing I'm proud about at Amgen is I was involved on a team that helped develop the next generation of manufacturing cell lines that Amgen is using right now. So, and my team had a big impact on how that cell line was developed. And so now millions of patients every year are taking a drug from Amgen that was made in a cell line that my team helped develop. So talk about an impact, right? I wanted to find a cure for cancer because I want to impact patients. And now for years to come, millions and millions of patients every single year will be taking a drug that came out of a cell line that I developed, right? So that's a legacy that I'm proud of as well.
I think that's so awesome. And I think that's the biggest feeling of joy is when you're able to see that translational aspect, when you can see from bedside to bedside and see that patients are being impacted today. I think that's a great moment.
Well said. Well said.
Okay. I have a few more questions. I noticed that in your career journey that you are also a bioinformatics consultant, and I'm very curious about that because I'm currently dabbling in bioinformatics. I do a lot of next generation sequencing analysis, also like RNA extraction to prepare the samples prior, and then also doing all the analysis afterwards for differential gene expression and cell type composition, etc. So I'm curious to know how you landed up in that job at the time.
Yeah, I stumbled onto that. It's kind of funny because when I was doing my sabbatical, I was a year into my sabbatical, and I'm thinking, hey, I got to get back to work here, because if I'm away from science too long, no one's going to want to hire me. I'll forget how to pipette, and I'll be a lost cause, right? So, and I kid you not, that very same week that I was thinking of going back to work, an attorney that I worked with at Agensis, because again, I have 100 patents, right? We did a lot of work together on these patents. He had gone to Accorda Therapeutics on Hudson Valley, New York, and he needed a bioinformatics consultant to help him out with the patents that company was developing. And it got me to pause. I was like, oh, okay. And they paid me really well. So I was working like 12 hours a week, so I can do all my crazy stuff my artistic stuff that I talked to you about. and still do some of the science from my home office. So I did that for a whole year, an additional year. And then I did some consulting with Zencor as well. So my sabbatical actually lasted 2 years, but one of that year involved doing some consulting. So I stumbled on consulting. I never went out to try to do it. So I'm not sure I'm the best advisor for that. The only thing I can say is, in my experience, the consultants are usually people that have a lot of experience. They've been in the industry for several years, like I had been. That's why that attorney contacted me, because he knew my track record, right? So when you're early in your career, I'm not sure how that's going to wind up working, right? Because when you think about companies, they tend to want to have people that have been in the business for a long time and have a lot of experience. And you know why they select people as consultants. So sorry, I don't have
Very
some good advice for you there.
no worries. I think the more interesting part was I think the title. I haven't really seen that title, like a bioinformatics consultant. Usually it's like a bioinformatics scientist or NGS scientist. There's so many different names for it. So I was just curious what your role was there. So a lot of people focus on getting publications and having these titles, which of course are important. But what do you think that people should hold on to beyond those
Oh,
metrics?
good question. Yeah, because I've always been one that never paid that close, well, didn't hold titles with that much esteem, right? So when I was getting jobs, and it wasn't something I tried to negotiate the highest titles, and I wasn't title hungry, and not even promotion hungry either. I just wanted to do my job well, and if a promotion came up, that's great. If my leadership felt I was ready for promotion, I embraced that, but I didn't sit around hoping for promotions and so on. And a lot of people change jobs just because they want to get a higher title, and that's not necessarily the best way to do it. And titles can get super inflated depending if it's a small company versus a big company. So there's not really quite the best alignment. And in fact, when I joined Amgen, I actually took a title hit, I and I could have let that get in my way. I could have said, "Oh, well, I'm not taking this job because I don't have the title," But I'm so glad I didn't let that get in the way, because I wound up getting this amazing job, and eventually my title got moved up and that got worked out. But it would have been really stupid to lose out on this opportunity just because of a title. So got to be careful about the title situation, right? I'm a little unusual. I think a lot of my peers really do care about the titles and so on. I've just had this attitude of, have fun, do the best I can do, and hopefully it's enough to keep your bosses happy and your company happy, and if that leads to a promotion, that's terrific.
So, to kind of close out, what general advice do you have to help students break into biotech? I know you also have a mantra called PAM, passion and action equals a mantra. So, if you wanted to elaborate on your advice there.
So could I advise a lot of students? I pull out this 5-point plan, Rene's 5-point plan for success in biotech a lot. And it's funny because now when I meet people at engagements at universities, a lot of them, they remember parts of that 5-point plan, and it's fun to see that. So I touch on some of these along the way, but here goes. Okay. The first one is get internships. Remember I mentioned I had 6 co-ops when I was in my undergrad. The internships are so important. So get those internships. You can get internships during your graduate work as well. Both master's and PhD levels. Postdoc is like a big internship, right? But that experiential training that you get being in a company, experiencing the life is so valuable. Number 1, get internships. Number 2, ABC, always be challenged. So, get out of your comfort zone to do difficult things, volunteer for the tough assignments, change countries to get your PhD like I did. Just keep challenging yourself. If you're in a job that's too easy, you're not serving yourself well. Change jobs so you're going to be growing. And when I look back at my career, the times where I grew the most were when I was in jobs that kept me on my edge. I was a little nervous about it and it was a little challenging, but I grew a lot in those situations. So ABC, always challenge yourself. ABN is the one that people always remember. Always be networking. So important. Most of the jobs I've gotten are because I knew somebody at that company, right? Because I'm a good networker. It's really served me well. If you're not a good networker, you got to put the work into it. Always be networking, especially now with a tough job market. Networking is so important. And Biotech Connections LA, perfect place to be networking. I love the organization. I really love the work you guys are doing, and that's why I go to a lot of your events and participate in them. There's other organizations like SoCal Bio has a lot of monthly meetup sessions in the greater LA area. Biocom, Nucleate. There are all these other things you can get involved in to network with people. Get to face to face. The LinkedIn is great, and you should be doing that, but get yourself out there to these other organizations. Number 4 is find your superpowers, right? I mentioned how important that was for me, being a good networker and being good with people. What is your superpower? And find a job where you can do that superpower, use that superpower all the time. And then lastly, find your personal mantra. Like I mentioned before, what is your one sentence? Like my sentence was, I want to find a cure for cancer. What is that sentence for you? Be absolutely clear about it. And you have to do the work. I'd be surprised if people are listening right now. Can you say in one sentence what your mantra is? Very few people can say why they're in science. And when I advise all these early career talent folks, as I mentioned, very few people have it together that way. You got to do the work to figure that out. You have to go on the vision quest to go in deep, meditate, and figure that out. It's not going to come to you in the shower or taking a walk down the street. You got to spend a lot of time figuring that out. And it's so important. And for me, it was a foundation for everything, right? It's the reason why I could stand up to my dad and go on to university and not cave in. It's the reason why I could retake my qualifying exams and pass them the second time, right? It's the reason why I get through getting laid off in my jobs. During the tough times, you hang on to that. So I want people to make sure they have that together. So recap it: 5-point plan, get internships, always be challenged, always be networking, find your superpowers, and find your mantra, your personal mantra. You do those 5 things, I guarantee you're going to have a success in biotech. But with all seriousness, whenever you have mentoring chats or career chats with people, ask them what their 5-point plans are, right? Other people have different 5 points than mine, and suck up the ones that you can relate to, the ones that are practical. These 5 points, I hope, are really practical, and you can start executing on them today. But ask people how they feel they got successful. And everyone will have a different plan. You just heard mine, and it may not necessarily be the best, so find out from others what their plan is.
Thank you for sharing. I will be definitely looking for a successful career in biotech and also be hoping to follow these 5 points. So you have talked about using PAM to find your career path. Can you elaborate more on this?
I got a really fun story about how I found my PAM, and it started in high school. I mentioned I found this in high school, right? I had an existential crisis in high school. I think a lot of us have done that. It's kind of like, what am I going to do when I grow up? What am I going to study at university? What classes am I going to take? Oh my God, what am I going to do? And on top of it, for me, I had a dad who didn't want me to go to university. So I felt like I was really alone on this and I had to figure this out. I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. So what I did is, this is in Canada. We have basements in Canada. We had a finished basement with a red shag carpeting, the bar and the fireplace, and it had the palm tree mural with a beach on the one wall. And then my brother had a stereo down there, big multi-component stereo on chrome and glass stand and 5-foot tall speakers. And what I did, I put on the headphones with the cord that went to the stereo, and I had vinyl, and I put on Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. And I listened to it in the dark on the couch, laying on the couch for 2 weeks one summer. Every day I was in the basement just listening. I didn't know at the time, but I was meditating, I think. I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do when I grow up? Oh my God, what am I going to do? I had all this anxiety and I was just kind of struggling with my thoughts. So I just did the work. And I said it took about 2 weeks, every day, discipline. My mom thought I was on drugs. I'm sitting in the basement with the lights off with listening to Dark Side of the Moon over and over again. I would only get up every 20 minutes to flip the vinyl. And what wound up happening is things would bubble through your mind, right? good thoughts, bad thoughts. I had to really be connected with my heart. And whenever I thought of biology and chemistry, because those were my favorite classes in high school, I felt lighter and I thought, oh, that's cool. I love biology and chemistry. Okay, that's awesome. And then another bubble came up eventually where I know I really want to make a difference in the world. I want to leave this world a better place. Doesn't everybody want to do that? But it was really important to me. I just wanted to make a big impact on the world. And then the mantra, the other part of the equation came up. It's like, well, if I found a cure for cancer, that's a big deal. I would make a big difference in the world. And I would use my love of biology and chemistry to do that. And I just had that eureka moment and the skies opened up, the sun came shining through and I was like, that's it. My passion is biology and chemistry. My action is to impact patients. I want to find a cure for cancer. And my heart lifted and I felt so focused and happy and my anxiety went away. And it was one of the best thing I could have done in high school on my own. That vision quest really paid off for me. And I encourage all of you, some of you to do this. And I was talking to somebody at, I think it was when I was at USC. She talked about, I said, you got to do a vision quest. You got to figure this out. And I told her about my basement story. And she said, hey, I'm going on a silent retreat. She was a yoga person. I go, what better place to find your mantra by going on a silent retreat? I was like, this is awesome. You got to focus and do it. If you don't go on a silent retreat, maybe you go to the beach in Cambria and you have a cabin near the ocean, just listening to the waves crash in for a weekend. No devices, no cell phones, no TVs, nobody else. You don't talk to anybody. Just be alone with your thoughts and figure out what's going to come to the surface, right? And what your personal mantra is going to be. And hopefully you'll be able to find it. Otherwise, get Dark Side of the Moon on, turn off the lights, and maybe you'll have the same luck that I did.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing.
All right.
Going off of funny and cool stories, I wanted to share one quick funny anecdote that me and Rene had. I actually went to Amgen's career day as part of USC, and I was selected to be part of the poster session. I decided to wear these very uncomfortable flat heels.
That's right.
And I was walking around. I knew Amgen was a big campus. I'd been there once before a few years ago for a career visit, but I guess I just, fashion is passion. I needed to look good. So I decided to wear those flats and heels. There was a point when we were sitting down towards the end of the career day, and I was like, oh my God, I need Band-Aids because I have so many blisters. I cannot walk. And so I went up to Rene and I was like, hi, I really need Band-Aids. I have blisters. And he helped me out. So I'll remember that one forever.
I felt so bad for you.
So thank
Yeah,
you.
that was man, that was a great day. And yeah, you're right. We have a beautiful campus, very big. And yeah, if you come to one of our university days, make sure you wear comfortable shoes. And I think we sent you an email saying wear comfortable shoes. So you didn't read the email very
Maybe I
carefully.
overlooked it yeah.
But fashion took the lead there, right? Glad I was able to give you some Band-Aids to help out.
Yes. So thank you. Well, with that, Rene, thank you so much again for being here at Inside Biotech. You truly have such an inspirational story, and I really hope that all of our listeners can take away from that and address the challenges in their life more easily by listening to what you have come up with, your 5-point plan, your PAM, and all of your advice. Thank you again so much.
Thank you so much for having me on here. And this is a great service you're doing here with the podcast. And it's a great way to network, right? So congratulations to you. You're ABNing with this podcast and, keep it up. And hopefully you'll have some really great guests in the future. Continue on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Inside Biotech, hosted by Riley Conover-Elmer and Karishma Chhugani. Inside Biotech is produced by Biotech Connection Los Angeles. I would like to thank our production team, Stephanie Wu, Serena Gao, Brian Jimenez, Daniel Ars, Danielle Liu, Sanju Vardhan. Thank you to our sponsors, Amgen, Technova, LA Biospace, and Magnify CNSI. For information about upcoming BCLA events, visit bc-la.org or find us on social media at Inside Biotech. If you're interested in partnering with Inside Biotech as a potential partner or speaker, contact our team at bc-la.org. We invite you to follow us on your preferred podcast service and leave us a great review. See you next time.